let's correct your grammar mistakes. Specifically, I want to focus on mistakes that you might be making when you're having a conversation. So really, this is about fine-tuning your speaking fluency by avoiding or even just eliminating simple grammar mistakes. And if you are someone who would like to improve your speaking fluency, please subscribe, turn on notifications. That way I can become your teacher. My name is Wes. The channel is Interactive English. It's all about helping you reach your fluency goals. So the way that I want to approach this is telling you a story. So I'm going to be speaking. I just want you to listen and see if you can identify the mistake. See if you hear anything that's incorrect or maybe even just sounds a bit awkward. And then we'll talk about the mistake and I'll tell you how to correct it. So let's start with our first mistake and I'll begin with a story. So I just want you to listen carefully. Are you ready? Let's begin. My friend called me up and asked me if I wanted to do anything. So yesterday, we go to this big park and walked around for about an hour. At one point, a dog approached us and we don't see the owner. We hung out with the dog for about an hour and eventually the owner showed up looking for him. Did you hear the mistake? If I were to show you what I just said and you can read it, I think it's a little easier to identify the problem. So here is the story, this very short story that I just said to you. Now, this is a story that happened yesterday. In the past, it's finished. In that case, I should be using past tense verbs. And as you can see, so yesterday we go to this big park and a present tense verb slipped in there. So yesterday is a time expression which indicates clearly that I should be using the past. So yesterday we went to this big park. As I continued the story, at one point a dog approached us and we didn't see the owner. This is a little trickier because there's no time expression, but still I should be using the past tense. We didn't see the owner. Generally, when telling a story, just choose one tense and stick to it. For the most part, you're going to be using the past tense when talking about traditional narratives. You could use the present tense when telling a story if you want to create maybe a sense of urgency. So I could tell you the same thing and say, my friend calls me up and asks if I want to do something. So we go to this big park and we walk around. At one point, a dog approaches us and we don't see the owner. So again, I'm saying the same thing, but I'm using the present tense and maybe it gives you this sense that you are there with me and it's happening. However, like I just said, most of the time when you're talking about things that happened in the past, which most stories happen in the past, you're going to use the past tense. So how do you correct this? The one thing you really need to do is identify if you're accidentally using present tense verbs when talking about the past. And I think there are two ways to do this. The first is to record yourself telling the story. And then you can go back, listen to it, and see if you hear yourself using any present tense verbs. The next way, which I think is perhaps more useful, is to write the story down. Go back over the story, see if you find any present tense verbs because you know that you're talking about the past. Writing is more reflective, so it's easier to go back, look at what you've written, and identify those mistakes. Because if you're making the mistake when you're writing, you're likely making the same mistake as you're speaking and telling the story. So try those two things, see which one works best for you, and that's a great way to remove those present tense verbs when talking about a story in the past. Let's continue with our next mistake, and once again, I want to share a story with you, and I just want you to listen and see if you hear anything that maybe sounds a bit strange. Are you ready? The other day, I had a job interview. It was at an office that was in this big building, and I was having trouble finding it. So I told the person at the reception desk, I don't know where should I go. Thankfully, she pointed me in the right direction. Did you hear it? This is a mistake that I hear quite often. And let me show you what I said. And what I want you to really think about is the noun clause when I say, I don't know, where should I go? This is incorrect. The word order is incorrect because what I should say is, I don't know where I should go. So let's first talk about noun clauses. A noun clause is a dependent clause that functions like a noun in a sentence. And often they're introduced with subordinating words such as that, what, whether, if. The problem is that when you have words like what, how, why, your brain is probably thinking question, in which case the subject and the auxiliary verb are inverted. So I understand why people make this mistake. So instead of saying, I don't know, where should I go? I'm not going to use that question pattern. You should say, I don't know where I should go. And I'm using the normal sentence pattern, subject, verb. I don't know where I should go. So how do you correct this? Often this mistake is made when you start a sentence with I know or I don't know and then follow it with a noun clause. And I think you could really just drill some of these sentences into your brain and drill, 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 drill. And that's what I want to do right now. So I am going to say some sentences. I just want you to repeat after me. This is a drill exercise. Are you ready? I don't know where I'm going. I don't know where I'm going. I know who you are. I know who you are. I don't know what I should do. I don't know what I should do. I know how you can fix it. I know how you can fix it. The more you do this and just say these sentences out loud, even if they're just simple sentences, over time your brain is going to recognize that there are actually two different patterns. One for asking questions and then the other for using noun clauses. Let's take a look at our next grammar mistake when speaking English. So here is your next story, and just listen carefully. I was in such a rush this morning, I just ran out the door. I didn't eat something for breakfast. I was hungry the entire morning, and I had trouble focusing on my work. Did you hear it? If not, let me show you what I said, and you can read it, and in that case, it's probably a little easier to identify. So the mistake, I didn't have something for breakfast. Instead of something, I should have said anything. I didn't have anything for breakfast. So a mistake that I often hear is people confusing something and anything, or even someone and anyone, and even some or any. So something and anything, these are indefinite pronouns, but you're going to use them in different grammatical context. In general, you're going to use something with affirmative statements, and you're going to use anything with negative statements or questions. And the same goes for the other indefinite pronouns, someone or some with affirmative statements, and anyone or any with negative statements or questions. But I hope that as you were listening to this and you heard me say, I didn't eat something for breakfast, maybe it sounded a little strange because I'm using a negative statement. I did not. Therefore, I should use anything. I did not eat anything for breakfast. In my opinion, I think the best way to correct mistakes such as this is just to read. Read, read, read as much as you can. Get exposure to the language, but when you're reading, you're passively learning the language and you're seeing the words that are used together. So my recommendation to you, whether it's this mistake or many of the others, is just to keep reading. But in general, just remember you're going to use some, something, someone with affirmative statements and any, anything, anyone with negative statements or questions. Here is our next grammar mistake and your next story. Recently, I got a promotion because my boss told me I was making a good job and I should keep up the good work. I just hope I don't do a mistake in my new position because I really want to impress my boss. Perhaps this time you could just listen to the story and you notice that, okay, yes, this sounds a bit strange, but let me show you what I said and what I want to highlight, the two mistakes. Making a good job and do a mistake. I'm using these verbs incorrectly. I should say doing a good job and make a mistake. And often I will hear people confuse these two verbs, make and do. especially when they're using them in some common collocations. And collocations are words that are frequently used together. And because I'm talking about frequently used words and phrases, if a mistake is made, it does stand out a bit more. If somebody uses make instead of do, or vice versa. I understand why people make some of these mistakes, and generally it has to do with language translation, that in one's native language, you would use the verb do, or you would use the verb make. So let me give you some common collocations with the verbs make and do. Let's start with do. You do the laundry. You do the shopping, you do the cooking, you do chores, you do housework, you do your homework, you do research, you do a project, you do work, you do your job. You do business, you do your best, you do someone a favor, you do harm, you do damage. Now let's have a look at collocations with the verb make. You make a decision, you make a plan, you make an effort, you make a mistake, you make a suggestion, you make an announcement, you make a promise, you make an excuse, you make money, make a deal, make an investment, you make friends, you make an impression on someone, you make dinner, you make a mess. So there are many, many, many collocations with the verbs make and do. I'm just giving you some examples, but there are a lot of them out there and they are commonly used in everyday English. So let's talk about how to correct these mistakes, because I do not expect you to memorize all of these collocations. But what I would recommend is that you passively learn this information through reading and listening. Our brains are trained to recognize patterns. So the more you see these words being used together or hear these words being used together, you're going to absorb that information. And the next time you're talking about a mistake, you're just going to naturally use the verb make. And in that case, you will no longer make the same mistake. Here is the next grammar mistake. So let's listen to the story. My little girl loves to sing. I encourage her to sing. She sings beautiful. I hope that in the coming years she will pursue this activity if it's something she's passionate about. So maybe you were able to identify the mistake, but let me show you what I said. And the phrase that I want to highlight is sings beautiful. She sings beautiful. I am using the wrong word. Instead of beautiful, I should say beautifully and use the adverb. She sings beautifully. This is something I hear in casual conversation when people are telling a story or they're describing something and they confuse adverbs and adjectives. And generally what happens is people will use an adjective when they should be using an adverb. Like in the mistake that I just made. Instead of she sings beautiful, I should say she sings beautifully and use that ly adverb. Another common example would be me saying something like I do something good instead of I do something well. Good and well are often confused. In this case, you want to use the adverb well. You sing well. You dance well. You speak English really well. Adverbs can be a little tricky because they can modify verbs, adjectives, even other adverbs, so they're very versatile. If you want to correct this, in my opinion, and I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, you should read, and read some more. When you read, you're going to see the adverbs that modify the verbs, the adjectives, even other adverbs. You're going to see the adjectives that modify the nouns. And ultimately, this is just going to reinforce proper use of the language. Let's have a look at our next grammar mistake. So here is your next story. I had an argument with my brother, and lately we haven't spoken much. My birthday is next week, and I'm having a party. I invited my brother, and he said he is coming. However, I have doubts as to whether or not he will actually show up. So this one, it's a little trickier. It's a slight mistake, but let me show you what I said. And I want to highlight, he said he is coming. Because this is reported speech, but I'm using the wrong verb tense. I should have said, I invited my brother, and he said he was coming. So you have direct speech and reported speech. Most of the time when you're having a conversation, telling a story, you're going to use reported speech, but you need to be aware of the verb tense changes. Here is a simple chart. And if we go back to what I said, in direct speech, it's like my brother would say, I am coming. If I change that to reported speech, I'm going to use the past tense. He said he was coming. To give you another example, in direct speech, maybe I say, she is looking for her keys. If I change that to reported speech, then I'm going to change the verb tense. I said she was looking for her keys. To be perfectly honest, in spoken English, people are not going to pick up on a mistake like this as readily as some of the other mistakes, like confusing the verbs make and do. However, this is about fine-tuning your fluency, so you want to make sure that you're using the correct grammar. When it comes to correcting slight speaking mistakes like this, I think writing can really help. So I would encourage you to write a story, write dialogue. In that case, you're going to be using both direct speech and reported speech. As I've already mentioned, writing is more reflective. You can go back, reread, try to identify any mistakes that you might be making. Make sure that you're using the correct verb tense, because if you're able to correct these mistakes in your writing, I think it's going to have a positive impact on your speaking. Let's continue with our next grammar mistake in spoken English, and I really want you to think about this one because I hear these mistakes all the time. So let's first listen to the story. My cousin and I play in a basketball league. We have a game this weekend, and my cousin plays in the opposing team. The entire family is excited for the game, and everyone is going to be there. This is a slight speaking mistake that sometimes it just goes unnoticed. I don't know if you picked up on it. Here is what I said, and I'm going to highlight the phrase in the opposing team. So the mistake is the preposition. Instead of in the opposing team, I should use on the opposing team. When it comes to prepositions, I often hear in just casual conversation people using the wrong preposition. And again, this can be very confusing because there are many prepositions: in, on, at, around, over. The good news is that when you use the wrong preposition, it doesn't take away from the meaning. People still understand exactly what you're trying to say. But in this case, it's really about speaking accuracy. You want to make sure you're using the correct preposition for clarity. Now, the example I gave you is especially tricky because in and on, when talking about teams, either one may be used. It depends on the context. So when talking about sports, you're going to use on. She's on the tennis team. My cousin is on the opposing basketball team. When talking about work, you may hear people use in. They work in a team. So what I'm really trying to get at is that prepositions can be especially confusing because there are instances when you could use more than one and both of them are correct. Now, sometimes there are rules that you can follow if talking about times of the day, in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. Other times you just need to familiarize yourself with the preposition that may follow certain nouns, verbs, or adjectives, or that may be used in certain phrases. Like if I were to give you the adjective afraid, you're going to follow that with the preposition of. You're afraid of something. So how do you correct this so that you are using the right preposition and speaking accurately? I am getting ready to tell you one word. You probably know what word that it is. And yes, it is read. I want you to read more because this is the best way to passively learn the language, especially when we're talking about preposition, these small function words that people don't necessarily give much thought to. And I don't expect you to try to memorize a bunch of phrases, but as you read and learn this information passively, I think that is the best thing you can do, because even though listening, reading, writing, speaking, these are different skill sets, but there is a lot of overlap, and one skill may complement the others. So reading is going to help you passively learn this information, which is then going to allow you to speak more accurately. So if you take away anything from today's lesson, it is that you should read more. Let's have a look at our next grammar mistake, and I want you to listen carefully to this next story. Yesterday, I went to the grocery store. I was standing in line to pay, and there were two persons behind me. One person said the other cut in front of them, and they started to argue. Eventually, everyone calmed down, but it was a little awkward. Did you hear the mistake? I think this one, perhaps you were able to catch because it does sound a little awkward. So let me show you what I said, and I want to highlight the phrase two persons. So now that you can clearly see this, instead of persons, I should have said people. There were two people behind me. So the word people is an irregular plural noun. It's not like other nouns in which you just add an S to the end to make it plural. But this is very important because it is a word that is commonly used. And most of the time when I hear a mistake like this, it's when people are using the word people with a number. Accidentally, they use the singular person and try to make it plural. Two persons, three persons, four persons, when we should be talking about one person. And then if it's more than one, two people, three people, four people, five people. And there are other irregular plural nouns in which I hear the same mistake. People try to add an S to the singular noun instead of using the irregular plural noun. Some other common examples would be child, children, tooth, teeth, foot, feet, woman, women, man, men. These are commonly used words, and this is when a slight speaking mistake is made. Now, even though this is just a simple mistake, it really stands out. So just be mindful of these irregular plural nouns and try to correct these mistakes. So let's talk about how you can correct them. The first thing to do would be to identify if you are making any mistakes with these irregular plural nouns. I would suggest that you write a story and intentionally use some of the nouns that we just talked about, those common words, person, people, child, children. Go through, see if you can identify any mistakes. The other thing I would say is that the list of irregular plural nouns, it's not that long. I think you could go through and just memorize it and familiarize yourself with this vocabulary, the singular noun, as well as the irregular plural noun, and just drill it into your brain so the next time you're having a conversation, you're using the correct word. Let's have a look at our next grammar mistake, so listen carefully to the story. I thought the playground would be crowded because it was a holiday, but when we arrived, there were less children than I expected. It was nice and relaxing. The family had a great time. This is actually a story that I might tell someone because I have two children. I don't know if you heard anything that was a little strange, but let me show you what I said. And I want to highlight the phrase, less children. I just mentioned that children, this is an irregular plural noun. It is plural, which means that it is countable. So instead of using the word less, I should have used the word fewer. There were fewer children than I expected. So you're going to use fewer with count nouns. Fewer children, fewer items, fewer opportunities. You're going to use the word less when talking about non-count nouns. Less money, less water, less time. Now, the vast majority of times, people end up using the word less when they should use the word fewer. And often, but not always, it happens with these irregular plural nouns like children, people. Now, I will say that I think this is a slight speaking mistake because you will also hear native speakers make this mistake from time to time. I've even caught myself making this mistake and using less when I should use the word fewer. To give you another example, in the US, if you walk into a grocery store, you may see a sign like this that says 10 items or less. Items is clearly countable. So grammatically speaking, the sign should read 10 items or fewer. It's gotten to the point where I think this is becoming more and more acceptable, but still, it really is all about accuracy, and that is why I want to teach you the correct grammar. As far as correcting this mistake, just be conscious of these two words. We're only talking about two words, less and fewer. So when you're having a conversation, just be aware of the noun that follows. Is it a non-count noun or is it a count noun? Because if you're aware of it, I think you're more likely to be able to self-correct if you end up using the word less instead of fewer. So I hope you're able to keep these things in mind and avoid any of these simple or even glaring grammar mistakes the next time you're speaking English. If you enjoyed this lesson and learned something new, you can let me know by hitting that like button. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. So long.